Red Struggle area. VITAS is an organization that provides end-of-life care for adult and pediatric patients with life-limiting illnesses. We work with patients and families to provide comfort and preserve dignity in the face of terminal illness. Hospice services include pain and symptoms management, emotional and spiritual support for patients, and bereavement support for families. So, if you would, please welcome Pam, who will give us and help us discover why VITAS is the nation's largest hospice provider. Pam, thank you.
Quiet one. It's pretty amazing you can't hear me. Are we good now? Yes? Back there? Can you hear me? Good? I'd like to first start by acknowledging and saying thank you to each and every one of you that have served in our military and also to the spouses. We firmly believe that VITAS is impossible without us. So thank you so much for your service to our country. We know it's because of you that we have the freedoms we have today. So thank you. We find that one of the largest challenges in, everybody hears that word, a hospice, is like, oh, what? The whole denial thing. So the biggest challenge is helping people understand what hospice is and isn't. So I appreciate the opportunity to visit with you today. There is a universal joke which states that none of us will get out of here alive. And that is actually very true, because at some point all of us will pass. But we live in this death-denying culture. So actually, only 10% of us will die unexpectedly or suddenly, okay? And then the 90% will be through a life-threatening illness. In a little bit of history of in the 19th century, 3% of the population was less than 65 years of age, and most people died at home. Dying in the United States, 13% of the population is over than 65 years of age right now, and approximately 75% of Americans die in healthcare facilities. It's pretty amazing. And we now know that that number is going to increase because every 7 seconds, a baby boomer reaches over the age of 50. So here at the end of life, where would you prefer to receive medical care if you were terminally ill? And the prognosis is you have a disease that would indicate that you would pass within 6 months as a qualifier. So 9 out of 10 people say they would prefer their care to be taken care of at home. And a little bit of the history of hospice, the root word is hospital, hospitality, a shelter. It's the whole caring concept that we look at. A place of refuge. A little bit of history. In 1969, Peter Ross was probably one of the most renowned publishers on death and dying was written. In 1974, the first hospice was formed in the United States, and in 1976, VITAS became its beginning. In 1978, there actually was formed the National Hospice Association, and their focus is to mobilize and social change for the improvement of care at the end of life. So what is palliative care? A little bit about VITAS here. We really focus on providing 24 hours a day care, 7 days a week, for whoever needs it, regardless of their race, religion, and or inability to pay. So what is palliative care? The study and management of patients with active, progressive, far advanced diseases for whom the prognosis is limited, and the focus of care is really on the quality of life, as opposed to the number of days. When curative measures have failed to stop the disease, adding quantity to the patient's life, palliative care provides relief from the pain and symptoms of that disease, adding quality to the patient's life. So palliative care affirms life. We read these, he's way ahead of me. So what's the difference between curative and palliative? No, you're good right there. We'll keep it there. So curative is disease-driven. Okay, the doctor's in charge. You know, we can try this, we can do this, we can do this. The disease process is really the primary focus. And there's really few choices for the patients. When you get to the point of palliative care, it's very symptom-driven. Okay? The patient really becomes in charge. The disease process is secondary to the patient's wishes. And you have many choices for the comfort and quality of life that you would like to have. When is a patient appropriate? When it's, there's a life-limiting illness. Medicare regulations say that if you have a diagnosis that the prognosis would be that you would survive 6 months or less, then you qualify to be placed on hospice care. Okay? And it also requires 2 physicians to sign up, but typically it may be a hospice-based physician or your primary care physician that make that diagnosis. And of course, the patient or family can request hospice care. There are many, probably most prevalent in this has been whole cancer diseases that have been diagnosed for hospice care. And then there are additional non-oncology diseases such as cardiac, pulmonary, Alzheimer's, renal, liver, stroke, ALS, debility, unspecified AIDS. These are all qualifiers in particular diseases that might qualify you for hospice care. The disease progression, one of the things that we find is there'll be change in performance status. There may be a loss of appetite, excessive weight loss. They may have difficulty breathing. They may have increased pain, unrelieved pain, and the life systems once they're on. Confusion, restlessness. These are all the things that we would be treating. Weight loss, shortness of breath, disturbed bladder and bowel function, disrupted sleep, nausea and vomiting, all these things that we don't like to talk about. Again, end-of-life symptoms, people tend to forget that there is that other piece of the psychosocial component where there is very common depression, anxiety, ineffective coping between the family members and communication, a life role transition. You're moving on. The caregiver and their distress. And true hospice care covers all of these things. And there's the spiritual piece of it. The hopelessness, the isolation, feeling alone, the lack of power. We find that very common, especially in our military people that we serve. The loneliness, the need for reconciliation, back in their life. What have I done? What have I accomplished? How do I come to peace with all that? Hospice helps provide, needs to do all that. So hospice provides care for the family after the patient dies via bereavement services. Okay? For at least 1 year following the death, hospice provides, there's a variety of ways that we do that: letters, cards, visits, support groups, memorial services. That's great. We do what we call a memory bear. It's real common that we actually make. We have people that sew for us, that volunteer and sew for us. They take an article of clothing from the individual that has passed, and we put that, and we make a memory bear and give it to the family. It could be several family members. So it's one of the ways that we help provide the bereavement department. So what do you actually get with hospice? So in essence, there is an interdisciplinary team. So if you notice on the very top, the patient and family is a different color because that's really what drives it. That's the focus of what we're trying to accomplish. But you also will receive an attending physician. There'll be a hospital physician or the medical director. You will have a registered nurse. There'll be a hospice aide, a social worker, a chaplain, and a volunteer. And that whole team takes care of that hospice patient. So who pays for it? In 1982, Congress passed the Medicare hospice benefit. And it actually covers 100% of the costs related to the terminal diagnosis. We include E2E, pharmacy. Right? The thing that that I'd like people to totally understand is it doesn't cover maybe somebody's under hospice care and we're taking care of all those things, but they fall and break their leg. Well, if they fall and break their leg, then that's not part of the diagnosis for the hospice, so that would fall under whatever health care they would already have. So it does cover everything with the exception of things that may be unforeseen. It is covered over unlimited benefit periods. Basically, once they're qualified for hospice care, it's reviewed every 60 and then every 90 days. The thing that we find most often is people say, oh, I wish I would have known about hospice sooner. It's very common. What's the average? 5 days that people are on hospice care is very regular. But we actually treat people that have been on hospice care for over a year or even 2 years. But it's constantly reviewed and updated as to whether they're qualified or not. Okay, so the Medicare covered services, so it's going to cover all these things as far as that Medicare cost, the nursing, the physician visits, the home aid visits, volunteer services, medical and social services, spiritual, nutritional counseling, and bereavement and support for the family, we've talked about already. And all of this is based on the needs of the family and the patient. Again, they're the ones that drive what is required. You bring it ahead, Nate. That's okay. Okay, one more. So there are actually 4 levels of hospice care, and whatever hospice company you work with, they are all the same. So the first one is called routine home care. And basically, it would, all those providers that we talked about would come and provide services on a regular basis, several times throughout a week at home. And hospice care is provided at home, and at home can be wherever that patient is. It could be a private residence, it could be an assisted living facility, it could be a nursing home. We've actually cared for homeless people. So home is wherever that patient resides. So that's routine home care. Continuous care is maybe the illness gets more severe and it requires more attention to the patient. So the visits would be more frequent. There would be a nurse there on a more regular basis staying with the patient. Okay? Inpatient care is another level where, again, it becomes more difficult, but the symptoms cannot be managed where the patient resides, so they would be put into an inpatient setting until those symptoms are relieved, and then they would return back to their home. The 4th level is respite care. We're fully aware that caregivers that provide for a patient are under extreme duress or potentially under extreme duress, and so this provides them an opportunity to have a break where the patient would be put in an inpatient setting for 4 or 5 days while that caregiver gets a break. So, and all of those are paid for on a per diem basis based on the level of care. So that's how it's published. Okay, next. One of the things we've been handing out a lot over here is the whole ethical issues. As we talked about, people don't want to talk about it, but there are advanced directives, do not necessitate. We firmly believe in the patient choice, and the more you have written down as to what you want or don't want, to the point of what songs you want sung, what people you want involved, when you want to do things, should be in writing. So some of this falls there. We have handouts for that material. I know quite a few picked those up already. I'm not going to go into details. A whole other presentation on what all that is, but just be aware that it exists. So the next couple of slides go over that a little bit. So we include things like living wills, the durable power of attorney, healthcare. I happen to be married to someone that has served, and I firmly believe that you people that have served our country are probably the most qualified to have your choices at the end of life as to what you might want. So, advanced directions, will and more from the The other thing that is sometimes misunderstood is you do not have to have a do not necessitate order in place to receive hospice care. It's obviously the better thing to do, but it's not an actual requirement. Everybody know what DNR is? Okay. Okay, basically again, it's the same thing that we communicate with patients' wishes. You matter because you are you. You matter to the last moment of life. We all all we can, not only to help die peacefully, but also to live until we die. So it's really all about living every day well. It's really what hospice care is all about. I wanted to address one other thing, because as we mentioned, we focus on the unique needs of military personnel at the end of life. My husband is a Vietnam vet, and he actually volunteers for us, so I'd like to share this story. I've learned, as you all are probably well aware of, that the brother and sisterhood between military people is a very strong bond. And we find that there's nothing more powerful than having somebody that has served in the military go visit somebody that's under hospice care that has served in the military. So we're always looking for those that would opt to volunteer to go and visit other military personnel. So I offer that opportunity out to you, and we welcome any questions or concerns you might have. I think the other piece is it's not easy to do. I actually started with VITAS as a volunteer, and somebody said, "Oh, you as a volunteer, you look for a hospice patients?" And I went. And a good friend of mine said to me, she said, "You know, it's all in how you look at it. It is an honor to be with someone and help someone path to the next life." So I look at it in that respect. So if any of you have any interest in that respect, certainly anything I thought to do as far as becoming a volunteer. So it wasn't 45 minutes. Any questions? What did we miss? You know, I find that to be true. Everybody's like, yes, sir.
Let's say somebody is in a nursing home and, goes living on in a nursing home, but then takes a turn for the worse. Does hospice care kick in then?
A hospice care will be, the qualifier is whatever illness, whatever is going on with that patient, if that disease or whatever the issue is, it could be a combination of things. Two doctors have to say that they qualify for hospice. And that would be that whatever illnesses are occurring, that patient would, if it took its normal course, would pass within 6 months. They can stay in the nursing home. We provide hospice care wherever that need is. So that it doesn't necessarily mean that they would have to leave that facility. Is that answer your question?
So then hospice care picks up the nursing care costs?
They do not cover the cost. That is a very good thing. They do not cover the cost of the nursing home. The hospice benefit is covered on those 4 levels of care that we talked about, and they're provided there by that whole team, the doctor, the nurse, the social worker. That's what it covers. But the cost of staying at that facility would stay the same. That probably doesn't answer the way you wanted to do it, but that's the way it works.
I'm trying to figure this all out in terms of nursing home costs, hospice costs, and that other bugaboo, long-term care, which nobody seems to know what exactly it covers.
Well, nursing home is long-term care. Okay. Long-term care is a very general term. Okay. And you can be in a nursing home. Typically, it is a nursing home facility or a skilled facility. Okay. Those costs are those costs. They don't go away once you get put on a hospice bed. Hospice, those 4 levels of care that I talked about, they're paid for on a per diem basis. It's a Medicare benefit, so 65 or older are automatically eligible for the Medicare benefit. If you're younger than that, then there are quite frequently, actually there's a military, a VA benefit for hospice. And most insurance companies now cover the hospice care. Okay? The other thing with VITAS is we never turn anybody down, we do a lot of charity care. But it doesn't cover the expense of the nursing home. In other words, what it costs you to stay there every day, that's still exists. It's still there. It's strictly pretty much medical care. Does that help?
Yes and no. Thank you very much.
Stop by now and we'll make sure we clarify. Other questions? Yes.
My father died a couple years ago, and he lived the last few years of his life in skilled nursing care at home setting. And my mother continued to pay for that out of pocket to the day of his death. But the last 2 weeks of his life, he received hospice care in the nursing home because he needed much more intense care. And hospice was paid for 100%, and that meant that the nursing staff and the unskilled care setting of the nursing home was supplemented, so he had round-the-clock skilled care at his bedside. And in addition to that, my mother had support of the hospice care service. So it was two different skill sets coming to care for him and also my mother. So it's two different service levels that come together to care for not only the patient at that point, but the family. And again, for my dad, his home was the nursing home. And that expense, whether it's maintaining your mortgage or your rent or whatever, that stays in place. And hospice doesn't take care of that. In his case, it was his nursing home expense. And now it was supplemented by the care level he needed for his end-of-life expenses and palliative care.
Okay. Other questions? Okay, thank you so much. Appreciate the opportunity.
And we appreciate the fact that you came in and gave some information on the end of life. Unfortunately, I had a lot of time.
None of us qualify. None of us qualify.
But thank you very much for that position being not on. And thank you very much. One of the questions that came up during the break time was, where do I get my DEERS enrollment updated? Fortunately, you're in a facility that does DEERS update. We did not make arrangements today, and I guess that's my fallacy for not thinking about it. But we did not make arrangements for having that clerk on staff today. But you can make arrangements here at this facility, at the 86th facility, at Great Lakes, and I'm told there's also a facility at in Joliet for the Marine Corps. And if they have a DEERS facility, they're supposed to be able to provide updates for you at any of those DEERS facilities. Coming here, I am told that you do not have to have an appointment. Having been manager of a DEERS facility once before, I would tell you, please make an appointment, even though it's not required. Here they will take walk-in. I guess getting in is a challenge because of security of the building. But they do take walk-ins at this facility, and ideally I would suggest that you make an appointment. If you call the center here, ask for the DEERS office, and they will transfer you down to the DEERS office and you make an appointment. Question?
What's the number here?
I do not know what the number is. Just a moment. Okay.
I think call first.
The number is 800
Number is 800
315
315
6327,
6327,
extension 149.
extension 149, that gets you to the DEERS office itself.
Is that the same as the ID card on?
Yeah. It's the same as the ID card office, yes.
The Joliet facility is only by appointment certain days.
The Joliet is by appointment at specific days of the week. So you need to call the Joliet facility if you're going there. Yes, Chief.
I also have some information on the back of one of my brochures. It's Bill Connect website where you can update your DEERS online. The website address is on this brochure if you like that.
So you can also do it online, no question.
Yeah, I guess this is time to ask this question. I'm wondering if you would get in the second marriage late in life. Yes, we. So I'm going to have to get my new wife. Is DEERS with the ID, is it separate or, you know, I don't know what I'm supposed to do to get her signed up for.
You will need to go in and get your DEERS form updated. You have to provide information update. In the past, they required a copy of the marriage license to validate that and witness that information. But you do need to go to a DEERS facility to update your form and the information. And the wedding or the marriage certificate is the document that they use to actually verify what you're trying to update.
Then they'll do that.
Oh, and they'll do the ID card after you update yours.
I asked him about that while ago. Now, is Joliet only for Marines?
No. They do all services, but they only do it one day a week, as I recall.
And what?
I don't know the address. It's the Marine Corps Reserve Center.
Marine Corps Reserve Center.
If you
one Great Lakes personnel, that's every day.
Off from Bourbon area.
This is,
It's
this,
a limit for the outfit, they prefer A and B.